welcome back to the Daily Fix. It is just past 4, and if you are home, then good for you. It's Monday. Who needs to be working? It's a much better idea to be watching the Daily Fix. Now, we have Lea Stening in studio to answer all of your nutrition questions and to chat about all the nutrition topics in Christchurch. Thanks for coming in, Lee. Good to have you back.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Yes.
I thought this week we might talk about fat, because we did start talking about that last week.
I know, and we got really interested in it, so we're going to have to talk about it. Okay, so you wanted to talk about good fats and bad fats and all
just
those?
what we use fat for. You know, fat's really important. It's the most important thing to say. We do need fat in our body.
Yeah.
It helps to protect our organs. It helps to carry a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins in our body. It actually regulates hormones too and fertility. A lot of people don't realise that.
Okay.
And so it's an important thing. And how much we need depends on our age and activity level.
Right.
Like you take a young person who might be an athlete, they need between 20 and 25% of their calories coming from fat, because most of the energy is really coming from carbohydrate. That's what they use for their running, and they use a bit of protein there for muscle building as well. So they don't need as much fat as, say, a baby.
Yes.
When a baby's born, it's breastfed, and a lot of the colostrum that comes in the mother's milk initially is quite high in fat. That's to develop the nerve and brain tissue of the baby. And then as it gets a little bit older, the mother's milk changes and starts becoming more carbohydrate based. And then within the first year, that's why we say when you're coming from breast milk, you need to introduce your baby to whole cream milk as opposed to low-fat milks, because they need that fat in the early stages. And then they go on to mega milks and light blue milk. And by the time they're 5, they're getting more into the type of milk we all should be drinking, which is really the trim or calcium milks that have got less fat but more protein and calcium. So we need fat at different stages. We need different amounts. So whilst I was saying a young athlete might need 20 to 25% of their calories coming from fat, a child might need between 30 and 35%. So it's a matter of how old you are and what you're doing. And then we come on to the different types of fats that are there. And I think everybody's heard about saturated fat, because it's sort of the nasty. It's a difficult fat because it's one of what we call one of the more unhealthy fats, because it tends to be sticky and it tends to catch in your arteries. And so, unfortunately, it's very widely distributed in our food. Now, some of the foods we find saturated fat in are healthy foods like meat and cheese and eggs and milk.
So it's okay in those?
It is, but we have to try and limit it. That's why we say if you're having meat, trim off the fat. Try not to fry your meat, grill it instead. So you're still getting the iron from the meat, but you're not getting all that saturated fat. It's not so healthy. Right. And we say try to reduce intake of things like fried food and butter and things like that.
Yes.
Okay. Then opposite that, the saturated fats, we've got the poly and monounsaturated fats, and they're tiny. They're liquid at room temperature and they move through your arteries really quickly. So they're the good guys. So we want to have a lot more of those, and you'll find them in fish, and that's why these days we encourage everybody to get more fish in their diet and start having more nuts and seeds and grains and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
So we've got the unhealthy and the healthy ones.
Right.
Then we've got a third group called trans fats.
Yes.
And they're real nasties.
Oh, why's that?
Well, they're partly hydrogenated, they're very manufactured, and their role is really to extend the shelf life of processed foods.
Ah, so they're plastic.
They're very plastic, and they actually, not only do they extend the shelf life, they actually mean that some foods don't have to be refrigerated. Where they are found in things like processed foods like crisps and corn crisps, things like biscuits and cakes and creamers, all that type of thing. So out of foods that have been sort of manufactured really to make you feel full and to last a long time, but really they're not so healthy.
Right.
So,
okay. So is that like, you know, when you get those plastic cheese, like those cheese slices, and they don't even have to be in the fridge? That freaked me out. I found that out recently.
Yeah. Well, once again, when you come to look at foods, you have to look at what the trans fat level is. Now, these trans fats have been linked a lot with margarine, because here in New Zealand people seem to think that margarine has been made with the same hydrogenated process that's been used in trans fats. But in actual fact, we've got very strict regulation here regarding our margarines now. And when you look at butter, for instance, if you're looking at the butter-margarine argument, which is always rampant, butter is made of a 50% saturated fats, when polyunsaturated margarines are only 28% saturated.
Right, so that margarine is actually going to be better than
yes, it will be.
butter?
And also the trans fats that you find in butter, 4% of butter is trans fats, where there's virtually none now in margarines. It's down to sort of like 0.1 percent.
Right, because I always thought margarine was the bad guy,
I know.
but it might have used to have been a bad guy, you're saying, and
Yeah,
now it's actually can be all right.
Yeah, it's because we don't hydrogenate our margarines here anymore in New Zealand. They use a process here in Australia called esterification, where they make the oil solid by attaching it to something else, like they mix it with water. And also milk powder and things like that. So they can make a margarine which is much more stable, which is solid, just like butter is, perhaps not as hard as butter, but it's much healthier for us. And now they've also bought in one called, it's made with plant sterols.
Yes.
That's like the proactive and logical margarines you see in the supermarkets, and they're a bit more expensive, but they're very cunning because they compete with cholesterol and they actually stop cholesterol absorption, so they lower cholesterol. So they're quite active in helping us to lower our cholesterol level.
Great. Okay, so you're mentioning cholesterol.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that is a big issue. I've had a few people just, lunchroom conversations or with friends, and they say, oh, I'm really high in cholesterol, and I just can't get my cholesterol down. My doctor's at me for it.
Sure.
How do you get your cholesterol down?
Yeah, it's tricky, because we actually make cholesterol in our body and we eat cholesterol too. Cholesterol comes through some foods like liver and crayfish and prawns and things like some of those
so
foods.
So
are
what is
quite
cholesterol?
Nice.
On a real base level?
Yeah, it's quite a sticky fat, but it's a fat that's also in our bodies. It's one we do have some there. But what we do know is the biggest thing that affects cholesterol is saturated fats and trans fats. So it's not just about the amount of fat you have, it's the type of fat that's really important. So when you bring in the saturated fats and the trans fats, they make the cholesterol build up in our arteries. And so what happens is you get these, your arteries are like a tube, if you like, you've got blood circulating through them. What happens is that fat starts causing plaque to develop, or fatty clogging, sort of fatty plaques, streaks, if you like, collecting in the artery lining. And so over time they build up and they harden, and eventually they break and have a blood clot forming, and that's what leads on to stroke and heart disease.
No, so that's really bad.
Not so good.
Yeah.
So if somebody was coming to me or a dietitian to have their cholesterol checked, what happens is they arrive with a blood result, and their doctor's given them a form which shows at least 4 of the fats in their bloods that have been tested. And those levels are really easily manipulated by a dietitian because each one of those levels relate to food that they're eating. So a dietitian's job is to try and help those people to lower their cholesterol. The other fact is to say that cholesterol in our bloodstream and in our body is not just affected by food. Cholesterol is also affected by hereditary. A lot of people have naturally high cholesterol because that's what's happened in their families. That's a genetic characteristic. The other thing is cholesterol can be raised by smoking and by being overweight. And also stress can have a big effect on that. So it's not uncommon for people who are in business, also people who live in Christchurch because we've had so much stress lately, to start noticing that it not only is their weight necessarily going up, but also their cholesterol is too.
Okay.
And the sooner you sort it out, the better.
Right, so it's not just the diet, because a lot of people might think, I've cut back on these particular foods. It's the whole lifestyle again.
It is a lifestyle.
And you stress that with a lot of things, that it's lifestyle as well as actually what you're eating, which is interesting.
It is interesting, and it's something that best of all is very treatable. Often people say, I've got a high cholesterol, it's in my family, but even that is still always able to be changed. And so dietitians will work with these people and try and help. And I think weight is very tied to it. You find that now the treatments for controlling diabetes and obesity and heart disease, it's all the same thing as controlling weight and controlling the amount of saturated fat and trans fats coming in, getting those sticky fats down and getting the good fats up through using margarines and oils and fish and nuts and seeds and grains, all those good things.
That's really cool. We had a couple questions come through, and I'm hoping you can answer them. One's from Abby Taylor. Thank you, Abby. She says, I eat constantly, but I never feel full. Apparently it's because I have a fast metabolism, but I'm worried I'm not getting the right nutrients. What can I do?
Yeah, well, once again, a dietitian would do a nutritional assessment on her to find out what it is she's actually doing, what is she eating, because a lot of people don't realise that the importance of, if you wanted to control body weight, for instance, you can't get hungry, because the moment you get hungry you want to eat more, and this is what's probably happening to her. So why is that happening? Well, you need to look at the type of food she's eating. Some foods are metabolised more quickly than others. Some actually go through you more quickly, so they raise your blood sugar and then they disappear really quickly. So they sort of leave you hanging there feeling like you want something more. The other thing is that some foods have a characteristic that actually makes them swell. So some foods are naturally bulky, and we talked more about that last week when we talked about, or the week before, we talked about a lot about fibre and how some foods are naturally more filling. But they've also discovered that some foods have what we call a higher satiety index. In other words, they're naturally more filling. So for instance, potatoes Potatoes
Yes.
is something you hear a lot of negative things about.
Right.
But you take one humble potato about the size of a hen's egg
Yeah.
and compare it in the amount of calories you get from a quarter of a cup of rice.
Yes.
The potato is 3 times more filling for the
Wow.
same number of calories as the quarter of a cup of rice.
So you can't just say that it's bad just because it's potatoes.
Well,
It
I mean,
actually
you
might
take
be more filling.
yeah, you take rice. I could eat a cup of rice in no time and still feel hungry. But 4 potatoes,
No way.
it's a lot harder. 2
No.
cups of rice, 8 potatoes. Most people would say you've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
How could you eat 8 potatoes? But the calories in those 8 potatoes is just going to be the same as the 2 cups of rice. So
Absolutely.
in relation to this lady, I'd say you need to look at your timing of food, the type of food you're eating, when you're eating, and you also need to look at how you label hunger. Because hunger means different things to different people. To some people, hunger means a griping feeling in their tummy.
Yes.
Others get shaky. Some people just get really irritable.
Right.
And I have people say they never get hungry, and yet
Okay.
when you really look at their food intake, they are. It's just that hunger's coming out through stress and irritability,
no.
agitation.
Okay, well, we've got more questions for you,
Sure,
but I
okay.
think we're actually running out of time.
Oh, okay.
So we might have to do that next week.
Sure.
But you're going to stick around for a bit, aren't you?
Yeah, sure.
Great, because we've got a consumer topic a bit later on where we're going to talk about
Okay.
crackers. The
Right,
humble
okay.
cracker.
Excellent.
People eat them all the time,
They
and
do.
apparently some are a lot worse than others.
Indeed
So we'll
they
do
are.
that later on.
Happy to help.
But thanks so much for coming in,
Pleasure.
Lee.
No problem.
That's Lea Stening, and she's just giving us all the advice on nutrition. Now, we're going to go to a quick ad break. When we come back, Michelle McWilliam is going to be chatting about building your business, keeping it going through a divorce. That's next.